I still remember the taste of blood in my mouth when Mark pressed me against the kitchen counter and hissed, "If my mother moves in, you will smile and serve her, or you'll learn what silence feels like." It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my board meeting days at Stellar Consulting, the firm I built from nothing in a cramped studio in Hell's Kitchen 12 years ago. The firm that now had 17 employees and offices in Midtown. The firm whose name was on my business cards, scattered now across our kitchen floor like confetti at a funeral. Mark's hand was still gripping my wrist, not tight enough to bruise where people could see. He'd learned that years ago, but tight enough that my fingers were going numb. "Did you hear me, Lucy?" I heard him. I heard everything. The way his voice dropped half an octave when he wanted me to be afraid. The sound of his mother's voice on speakerphone 20 minutes earlier, that syrupy sweet tone that always preceded a demand. "Marcus, darling, I've decided. I'm too lonely in that big house in Westchester. I'm moving in with you and her. Not Lucy, never Lucy, always her. Like I was a stray he'd brought home instead of the wife who'd put him through business school while working 2 jobs. The wife who'd co-signed his failed restaurant venture and never once said I told you so when it tanked. The wife who'd smiled through 7 years of his mother's comments about my career obsession and inability to give Marcus a proper home. Mark. My voice came out steadier than I expected. We talked about this. We agreed. You talked. He released my wrist and picked up one of my business cards from the floor. Lucy Chen, founder and CEO. He said it like it was a punchline. You think this makes you special? You think this matters more than family? There it was. The word he wielded like a weapon. Family. As if his mother moving into our 1,200 square foot apartment in the Upper West Side, the apartment I paid the down payment for, was somehow a sacred duty. As if my saying, "No, Mark, we need our space, our marriage needs room to breathe," was a betrayal of everything holy. Your mother has a beautiful home, I said quietly. She has friends, her book club, The slap came fast. Not hard enough to knock me down, just hard enough to remind me he could. My cheek burned, my eyes watered from shock more than pain. In 7 years of marriage, Mark had pushed, grabbed, cornered, but he'd never hit me. Not like this. Not with his palm open and his eyes cold. She's coming in an hour, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm now. You will go upstairs. You will cover that up. He gestured vaguely at my face. You will put on something decent, not those masculine pantsuits you live in. And when she arrives, you will hug her. You will tell her how happy you are. You will show her to the guest room, our guest room, Lucy, the one you turned into your precious home office, and you will help her unpack. He stepped closer. I could smell his coffee breath, see the vein pulsing in his temple. And if you embarrass me, if you make one comment, one face, one sigh that suggests you're anything less than thrilled. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. He walked out, left me standing there in the kitchen we'd renovated last spring, the one with the Italian marble countertops I'd chosen, the farmhouse sink I'd installed myself one weekend while he golfed with his college buddies. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, breathing, thinking, feeling something shift inside my chest, something fundamental, like tectonic plates realigning. Then I walked to the half bath off the kitchen, looked in the mirror. My left cheek was already reddening, the shape of his hand visible like a brand. My lip was split where my tooth had caught it. A thin line of blood traced down to my chin. I'd covered bruises before, hidden fingerprints on my arms with long sleeves in August, explained away a twisted ankle as clumsy Lucy, always in a rush. But this? I dabbed at the blood with a tissue, watching myself in the mirror. 43 years old, MBA from Columbia, self-made, respected. Featured in Crane's New York Business last year as one of the city's top female entrepreneurs. And here I stood, bleeding in my own bathroom, about to powder over my husband's handprint so his mother wouldn't see. Something in me, something I'd been swallowing and silencing and shrinking for years, finally cracked open. I pulled out my phone, took a photo, timestamp, date, the works. Then I opened the medicine cabinet, found the makeup kit I kept for those rare occasions I bothered with foundation. I did exactly what Mark told me to do. I covered it up, every red mark, every trace of violence. I made myself look perfect, serene even. Then I walked upstairs to our bedroom, changed into the Navy Street John suit Mark, hated the one he said made me look too aggressive, and I waited. Downstairs I heard the apartment door open. his mother's voice, shrill with excitement. "Marcus, oh my darling boy." I checked my reflection one last time. Flawless. Not a mark visible. But in my eyes, something new. Something cold and patient and very, very awake. I smiled at myself. This time I whispered, "I'm not breaking." I picked up my phone from the dresser, looked at the photo again, the evidence. Something else is. Then I went downstairs to welcome my mother-in-law home. The smell of ginger and scallions still takes me back. It was October. 8 years ago. Mark and I had been married less than a year, living in a cramped one-bedroom in Astoria, the kind of place where you could hear your neighbor's television through the walls and the radiator clank like a ghost was trying to break through. I was working 60-hour weeks at a consulting firm in Midtown, then coming home to freelance on the side building websites for small businesses, anything to bring in extra cash. Mark's restaurant had just failed, $20,000 down the drain, most of it from a loan I'd co-signed. He wouldn't get out of bed for 3 weeks. That's when Evelyn called, his mother, her voice tight with worry. "Marcus isn't answering my calls." "Lucy, what have you done to my son?" "Not is he okay?" "Not. How are you both holding up?" "What have you done?" I should have heard it then. The accusation. The blame. But I was young. I still believed that love and effort could win anyone over. "He's going through something," I told her gently. "But we'll be okay. We always are." She showed up 2 days later, unannounced, with 3 suitcases and a look on her face like she was here to save her son from a burning building. She stayed for 6 weeks. I gave her our bedroom. Mark and I slept on an air mattress in the living room. I woke up at 5 every morning to make her the breakfast. She liked soft-boiled eggs, whole wheat toast, fresh fruit cut into perfect cubes. I ironed her clothes. I drove her to her doctor's appointments in White Plains, sitting in waiting rooms for hours, holding her purse while she complained about the immigrant doctors who barely speak English. I never said a word. When she developed pneumonia that November, I was the one who stayed up 3 nights straight, monitoring her fever, making her bone broth from scratch, because she said the store-bought kind tasted chemical. I hand-washed her sheets every day, because she was too weak to make it to the bathroom in time. I did it quietly, without fanfare, because that's what you do for family. Mark barely left the couch. Depression had him in a chokehold, so I carried both of them. I worked my day job, my side gigs, and I played nurse, maid, and cheerleader all at once. When Evelyn finally recovered, when she was strong enough to go home to Westchester, she hugged Mark at the door, kissed his cheek, whispered something in his ear that made him smile for the first time in months. Then she turned to me, looked me up and down, and said, "Well, I suppose you did your best." Not thank you. Not I'm grateful. I suppose you did your best. Like I was a housekeeper she was tipping out of obligation. Mark didn't say anything. He just closed the door behind her and went back to the couch. I stood there in our tiny hallway, still holding the dish towel I'd been using to wipe down her breakfast tray, and I felt something small and vital inside me quietly tear. But I told myself it didn't matter. She was old-fashioned. From a different generation. She'd come around. I kept telling myself that for 7 years. Through every holiday dinner where she'd criticize my cooking, every family gathering where she'd introduce me as Marcus's wife and immediately change the subject. Every time she'd call the apartment and ask to speak to my son without so much as a hello to me first, I absorbed it. I convinced myself it was temporary. That eventually she'd see how much I loved him, how hard I worked, how much I'd given up. When my consulting firm started taking off, when I finally built something that was mine, I thought maybe that would earn her respect. I'd proven I wasn't just some girl who'd trapped her son. I was successful, independent, capable. Instead, it got worse. She started calling me career-obsessed, said I was neglecting Mark, that a real wife would know her priorities. She'd tell him, loud enough for me to hear from the next room, "Your father and I had nothing when we started, but your mother knew her place. She made our house a home." Mark never defended me, not once. He'd just shrug and say, "You know how she is." Yeah, I knew. If you've ever given everything to someone who later turned away, you'll understand this part. You'll know that specific ache, the one that lives in your chest, right behind your ribs, that tightens every time you remember how hard you tried, how much you believed, how deeply you hoped that love would be enough. Thank you to everyone who helps keep these stories alive. Every word you share, every act of kindness, helps protect those who still believe in family, who still try. I believed. God, I believed so hard. Which is why, when I heard Evelyn's voice that Tuesday afternoon, crackling through Mark's speakerphone, "Once I live there, I'll handle the finances." Marcus can't keep trusting her with money. Something inside me finally cracked clean through. I'd been standing at the kitchen counter, the same counter where Mark would press me against the marble 30 minutes later. I was holding a coffee mug, one of the ones we'd gotten as a wedding gift. White porcelain with little gold hearts. I set it down carefully. Very carefully. And I thought about the envelope hidden in my office closet, 12 years of secret savings. Money I'd been tucking away, 500 here, 1,000 there, from freelance projects Evelyn and Mark didn't know about. My emergency fund, my just-in-case money. The money I was about to need more than I ever imagined. I found the contract in the laundry basket. Not hidden, not locked away in some secret drawer. Just there. Folded carelessly between Mark's gym shorts and a pair of his mother's orthopedic stockings that I'd been washing for 3 days straight. It was Thursday morning. Mark had left for work. Evelyn was in the guest room, my former office, reorganizing my bookshelves. I could hear her upstairs, humming something tuneless, the sound of my career awards being moved, shoved aside, probably dumped in a box. I was doing laundry because that's what I did every Thursday. Routine. Normal. The kind of mundane task that keeps you sane when your face still aches from where your husband slapped you 2 days earlier. The paper was crisp. Official. The letterhead read Berkman and Associates, estate planning attorneys. My hands started shaking before I even read the first line. Transfer of joint assets. Marital property agreement. I sat down on the basement floor, right there on the cold concrete, the laundry basket tipping over beside me. The document was 8 pages long. Legal language, dense paragraphs. But some phrases jumped out like they were written in neon. Transfer of primary residence located at 247 West 81st Street. Our apartment, the one I'd put $60,000 down on. Transfer of joint savings account #4478. The account where my paychecks were deposited. $143,000. Every cent I'd saved for the past 7 years. Transfer of 2023 Audi Q5. The car I drove. The one I'd bought last year. In my name. To be held in trust by Evelyn Morrison, for the care and protection of Marcus Morrison, in the event of spousal incapacity or mental unfitness. I read that line 3 times. Mental unfitness. My vision blurred, the paper crinkled in my hands. They were going to take everything, the home I'd paid for, the money I'd earned, the car, the business I'd built, because if they controlled the finances, they controlled me. And the reason they'd give? I was unstable. Unfit. Crazy. I flipped to the signature page. Mark's signature was there, dated 2 weeks ago, right around the time he'd started being extra sweet, bringing me flowers, telling me he loved me. I'd thought we were healing. I'd thought he was trying. He'd been setting me up. Below his signature was his mother's, that sharp, aristocratic scrawl. And below that, my signature, except it wasn't. I stared at it, the way the L looped too wide, the way the Y descended too sharply. Someone had tried to copy my handwriting. Someone had practiced, probably traced it from old birthday cards or checks. But it wasn't mine. I couldn't breathe. The basement suddenly felt like it was collapsing inward, the walls pressing closer, the air too thick. They'd forged my signature. They'd forged my signature on a document that would steal everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, everything I was, and they were going to use my husband's word, his mother's testimony, probably some bought-off psychiatrist, to say I was mentally unfit. That's when I heard it. Upstairs, through the heating vent, Evelyn's voice, on the phone, loud, confident. She never worried about being overheard. No, she's being very cooperative actually. Surprisingly so. A laugh. I thought she'd fight harder, but Marcus handled her well. She's covering up the bruise like a good little wife. My heart stopped. Yes, the papers are ready. We'll move forward next week. Once I'm officially living here, we'll start documenting everything: her mood swings, her spending, her neglect of the home. Build the case slowly. Silence. She was listening to whoever was on the other end. Of course, she'll resist eventually. That's when Marcus will file. We already have Dr. Chen lined up. He's sympathetic to family matters, understands how career women can become unbalanced. Another pause. The signature? Please. I've been signing her name on Marcus's birthday cards for years. The woman doesn't even notice. That laugh again. Sharper now. She's too soft. Too trusting. Honestly, this is almost too easy. I sat there on the basement floor, holding a forged contract, listening to my mother-in-law plan my erasure. And something inside me, something I'd been holding together with wire and hope and sheer stubborn love, finally snapped. Not broke. Snapped. There's a difference. Breaking is collapse. Snapping is transformation. I folded the contract carefully, slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan, stood up. My legs felt strange, steady, stronger than they had in years. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal made you question your own worth, you're not alone. I know that hollow feeling. That moment when you realize the person you loved was treating you like an obstacle to remove, not a human being to cherish. Thank you to everyone who helps me tell these stories. Your support keeps this space alive for those who still believe that truth, somehow, will always find its way. Because here's what Mark and Evelyn didn't understand. I wasn't soft. I was kind. And there's a difference between those two things. One breaks under pressure. The other just stops being kind. I walked upstairs, past the guest room where Evelyn was still on the phone, past the kitchen where Mark's coffee mug still sat in the sink. I went to my car, started the engine, and I drove to the one place they'd never think to look. My lawyer's office. The same lawyer who'd incorporated my business 6 years ago, the same one who'd told me, casually, over coffee, "Lucy, if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me first." I called her from the parking lot. She answered on the first ring. "I need to see you," I said. "Now." My voice didn't shake. Not anymore. "And bring everything you have on fraud, forgery, and domestic abuse." The apartment became a museum of silence. I moved through it like a ghost. Kitchen to bathroom to bedroom. The same loop, every day. I stopped turning on the television. Stopped playing music. Even the hum of the refrigerator felt too loud, like it was announcing my presence when all I wanted was to disappear. Mark stopped looking at me entirely. Not in anger. That would have been something. No, he looked through me, like I was furniture. A lamp. Something stationary and forgettable. Evelyn watched me constantly. She'd sit in the living room, my living room, with my furniture that I'd chosen, paid for, arranged, and she'd watch me move from room to room, with this small, satisfied smile. Like she was observing an experiment, watching me shrink. And I was shrinking. I felt it happening. The way I started walking closer to the walls. The way I made myself smaller when I passed them in the hallway. The way I stopped speaking unless spoken to, and even then, my voice came out thin, apologetic. "Lucy, the towels need folding." "Yes, of course." "Lucy, this coffee is cold. I'll make a fresh pot." "Lucy, you left a light on upstairs. Do you know what electricity costs?" "I'm sorry." I said I'm sorry 60 times a day. For existing. For breathing too loud. For taking up space. The second time Mark hit me, I'd asked about the property transfer. It was a Sunday. Evelyn had gone to church, the only time I had the apartment to myself for an hour. Mark was in the den, watching a game. I'd rehearsed the question for 2 days, kept my voice soft, non-accusatory. "Mark, I found some papers, legal documents, about the apartment and our accounts. Can we talk about that?" He didn't even pause the game. "What papers?" "The transfer agreement. The one with my signature. Except," I swallowed. "Except it's not my signature." That's when he stood up. He didn't yell. That would have been easier somehow. He just walked over to where I stood in the doorway, backed me into the hallway, and grabbed my throat. Not tight enough to choke, just tight enough to lift me slightly onto my toes, just tight enough that I understood. "You're calling my mother a liar?" His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You're saying we forged documents, that we're trying to steal from you?" I couldn't speak. His thumb was pressing against my windpipe. "You sound paranoid, Lucy. You sound unstable." He released me. I collapsed against the wall, coughing. When Evelyn came home 20 minutes later, she found me sitting on the bathroom floor, still shaking. "What happened?" she asked Mark. I could hear them through the door. "She had an episode," he said calmly. "Started accusing us of stealing from her. Got hysterical. I had to restrain her for her own safety." "Oh, Marcus. Her voice dripped with concern. "It's worse than I thought. We need to document this, for the doctors." I sat there on the cold tile and thought, this is how it happens. This is how they erase you. Not all at once, not with one big lie, but with 1,000 small ones. A bruise explained away, a signature forged, a narrative built, brick by brick, until everyone believes you're crazy, and you start to wonder if maybe they're right. My phone stopped ringing. At first, I thought it was broken. Then I realized Mark had been calling my friends, my colleagues, telling them I was going through something. That I was not myself. That he was worried about me. When I tried to call my best friend, Jen, the woman who'd been my maid of honor, who I'd known since business school, she answered, but her voice was careful, distant. "Hey Luce, how are you holding up?" I need to talk to someone. Can we meet for coffee?" A pause. Too long. "I think maybe you should focus on getting better first. Mark said you've been really stressed. Maybe some space would help?" She hung up before I could respond. I stood in the kitchen, holding my phone, and realized they'd already won. They'd isolated me so completely that even my oldest friends thought I was the problem. If you've ever sat in a room so quiet it started to echo your thoughts, you'll understand this silence. The kind that doesn't feel peaceful. The kind that feels like suffocation. Like the walls are slowly closing in and no one can hear you screaming because you've stopped making sound. Thank you to those who help keep these stories alive. Your kindness helps give voice to people who've been forgotten, who sit alone in their pain, waiting to be seen again. I started counting things to keep myself tethered to reality. Cracks in the ceiling. 47. Steps from the bedroom to the kitchen. 32. Hours until Mark came home. 6. Hours until I could sleep and not have to be awake. 10. I washed the same coffee cup 4 times one afternoon because I'd forgotten I'd already washed it. I sat in the dark because turning on lights felt like making a decision, and I couldn't remember how to make decisions anymore. That's when I found it. I was doing laundry again, always laundry, endless laundry, Evelyn's clothes and Mark's clothes and sheets and towels, like if I just kept cleaning I could wash away what was happening. Mark's jeans were in the pile. I emptied the pockets mechanically. Wallet, keys, receipts. Wait. 2 sets of keys. One I recognized. Our apartment. His office. His gym locker. The other was unfamiliar. A single key on a plain ring. No label, but attached to it was a small plastic fob with an address label, the kind you get from a realtor. Unit 4B, 328 E 19th Street. I stood there, holding that key, my heart suddenly pounding in the silence. Mark didn't have family in Manhattan. Didn't have a storage unit. Didn't have any reason to have keys to another apartment. Unless... The thought formed slowly, like ice crystals spreading across glass. My husband had a second home. And I'd never heard him mention it once. I took the key. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't ask permission. I just slipped it into my pocket, finished the laundry, and waited. The next day, while Mark was at work and Evelyn was at her book club, I drove to 328 East 19th Street. It was a modern building. Doorman. Clean lobby. The kind of place that cost $4,000 a month, minimum. I showed the doorman the key, told him I was Mark Morrison's wife, that I'd forgotten which unit was ours. He smiled. Friendly. 4B, right? Mr. Morrison and his mother are such nice tenants. His mother. I rode the elevator up, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack a rib. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, but it was nice, furnished, lived in. There were dishes in the sink. A woman's bathrobe on a hook in the bathroom. Evelyn's reading glasses on the coffee table. They'd been living here, together, while I paid the mortgage on our apartment, while I cooked and cleaned and shrank myself into nothing. This was their escape plan, their backup home, the place they'd moved to once they'd taken everything from me. I found the documents in the desk drawer. Lease agreement, Mark Morrison and Evelyn Morrison, co-signers. First month's rent paid 3 months ago the same week Mark brought me those flowers. A handwritten note in Evelyn's sharp script. Once Lucy is removed, transition here. Cleaner start. Less mess. Removed. Like I was a stain, trash, something to be disposed of. I photographed everything. The lease, the note, the second toothbrush in the bathroom, the mail piled on the counter addressed to both of them. Then I went home and did something I should have done weeks ago. I opened Mark's laptop. He'd left it on the kitchen counter, password protected but not well. His mother's birthday. I'd watched him type it 100 times. The email folder loaded. I scrolled, hands shaking, and there it was. Subject: Legal Options, Morrison Case. From Jonathan Berkman Esquire. Mark: Per our discussion, once Lucy is declared mentally unfit via psychiatric evaluation, we can proceed with emergency conservatorship. Your mother will be appointed as primary guardian of joint assets. Eviction proceedings can begin within 30 days. I recommend documenting all erratic behavior outbursts, paranoia, refusal to cooperate with medical care. The key is building a consistent narrative. Let me know when you're ready to move forward. I read it 3 times. They weren't just stealing from me, they were planning to have me committed. Then I saw the other folder, labeled Voice Memos. I clicked. Mark's voice. Recorded 2 weeks ago. Clear. Calm. Talking to his mother. So we stage it. You accidentally leave your medication out. Lucy's been so stressed, so erratic she grabs the bottle, throws it, maybe breaks a window. We call 911, say she's having a breakdown. They take her for a 72-hour psych hold. Evelyn's voice interrupting. And once she's in, we file the paperwork. By the time she's released, we have conservatorship. She'll have no access to money, no legal standing. Perfect. Mark again. She won't even fight it. She's too beaten down. Laughter, both of them. Laughing. I sat there in my kitchen, the kitchen I'd renovated, in the apartment I'd bought, listening to my husband and his mother plot my erasure, and something happened. I stopped shaking. My hands went still. My breathing slowed. The fog I'd been living in for weeks lifted, and suddenly, everything was sharp, clear, focused. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unstable. I was being hunted. And now I had proof. If you've ever found truth in the quiet moments after pain, you know what this part feels like. That cold clarity, that sense of the ground finally solidifying beneath your feet after months of drowning. Thank you to everyone who supports these stories. Your kindness keeps hope alive for people still finding their voice after betrayal. I copied every file, every email, every recording. Then I made 3 calls. First, my lawyer. Second, my bank, to freeze all joint accounts. Third, a locksmith. By the time Mark came home that night, I wasn't the same woman he'd left that morning. I was someone else entirely. Someone he should have been terrified to underestimate. There comes a point when silence stops meaning defeat. It becomes preparation. I sat at my kitchen table the morning after I found everything, the apartment, the emails, the recording of them laughing about committing me, and I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't break anything. I made coffee. Strong, black. The way I used to drink it before I started making it weak because Mark said strong coffee made me too wired. I drank it slowly, watching the morning light filter through the curtains, and I thought, for years I mistook generosity for love. Now, I'm learning the quiet math of self-respect. The first call I made was to my bank. I need to freeze all joint accounts, I told the manager. My voice was steady, businesslike. And I need documentation of every withdrawal made in the last 6 months. Mrs. Morrison, are you sure? This will require both account holders to... I'm the primary account holder, I said. Check your records, my name, my social security number, my money. There was a pause. Typing. You're right. I apologize. We can process this immediately. 30 minutes later, $143,000 was locked, untouchable, safe. Mark's credit card, the one linked to our joint account, declined at lunch that day. I know because he called me, furious. What did you do? Protected our assets, I said calmly. There's been some unusual activity. I'm just being cautious. Unusual activity? Lucy, what are you talking about? Nothing to worry about, I said. I'll handle it. I hung up before he could respond. That was Tuesday. Wednesday, I changed the locks. I waited until both Mark and Evelyn left him to work, her to her salon appointment. I had a locksmith there within the hour. New deadbolts, new keys. 3 copies. One for me, one for my lawyer, one hidden in my office safe. When Mark came home that evening and his key didn't work, I opened the door myself. What the hell, Lucy? I had them changed, I said, handing him a single key. For security. You can never be too careful these days. His jaw tightened, but what could he say? It was my apartment, my name on the deed. Evelyn tried her key an hour later. It didn't work either. "Lucy," she called through the door. "Lucy, my key isn't working." I took my time walking to the door, opened it slowly. "Oh," I said, blinking like I'd forgotten. "I changed the locks. Safety precaution. Here." I handed her a key. "Just the one. Don't lose it." She stared at me. Something in her eyes shifted. Uncertainty. Just a flicker. Good. Thursday, I installed a recorder. Small, digital, voice-activated, tucked behind a picture frame in the living room. That evening, after I'd gone upstairs to rest, I listened from my phone as they talked. Mark's voice frustrated. "She's acting weird. Did you see how she looked at me today?" "Evelyn. She's planning something. I can feel it." "Planning what?" "She barely speaks. She just does what we tell her." "Exactly. That's what worries me. She's too quiet." Pause. "We need to move faster," Evelyn said, "before she figures anything out." "She won't. She's too broken." I saved the recording, added it to the folder I was building, evidence file growing thicker by the day. Friday, I met with my lawyer. Her name was Sarah Chen. No relation, though we joked about it when we first met years ago. She'd incorporated my business, handled my contracts, knew every dollar I'd earned. I walked into her office in Midtown carrying a flash drive and a folder 6 inches thick. "Sarah," I said, sitting across from her, "I need you to help me disappear someone from my life." She looked at the folder. "Who?" "My husband. And his mother." I slid the evidence across the desk. She opened it slowly, read for 10 minutes without speaking. Her expression changed from neutral to disturbed to coldly furious. When she looked up, her eyes were sharp. "Lucy, this is felony-level fraud. Forgery, conspiracy, domestic abuse, financial exploitation." She paused. "You could have them arrested today." "Not yet," I said. "Why not?" "Because I want them to think they're winning. Just a little longer." She studied me. "You've changed." "I've woken up." She smiled. Small, approving. "What do you need from me?" "Prepare everything. Restraining orders, eviction notices, fraud charges, asset protection. I want it ready to file the moment I say so." "When will that be?" "Soon," I said. "When they think they've finally won." That night at dinner, Mark and Evelyn sat across from me, discussing their plans like I wasn't there. "Once the evaluation is scheduled," Evelyn was saying, "we move everything into the trust. Clean transfer." "And the business?" Mark asked. "Dissolved or sold. She can't manage it if she's declared incompetent." I ate my pasta, chewed slowly, said nothing. Mark glanced at me. "You're quiet tonight." I looked up, met his eyes, didn't smile, didn't frown, just looked. For the first time I saw it, fear. The most feared thing by abusers is the silence of those they once despised. "I'm fine," I said softly. "Just tired." But we both knew that wasn't true. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Everything's ready. Whenever you are." I stood in my kitchen, the one they thought they owned, and I smiled. For the first time in months, I felt the sun on my face, and understood what it meant. I didn't need them to hear me anymore. My silence had already spoken. And soon, so would the law. The meeting was Evelyn's idea. She'd arranged it for a Saturday afternoon, in our living room, the same room where Mark had hit me, where I'd shrunk myself into silence, where they'd plotted my erasure. She'd invited Mark's uncle, a retired judge, her sister, a former social worker, their family lawyer, a man named Gerald who'd known Mark since he was a boy. The entire room was designed to make me feel outnumbered, cornered, like the intervention it was meant to be. I arrived last, deliberately. They were already seated when I walked in, Mark on the sofa, Evelyn in the armchair like a queen holding court, the others arranged around them, faces serious, concerned. Evelyn smiled when she saw me. That thin, satisfied smile. "Lucy, dear, thank you for joining us. Please sit." I sat, hands folded in my lap. "Quiet." "We're here today," Evelyn began, her voice dripping with false compassion, "because we're worried about you. We've all noticed. Changes. Your behavior has been erratic. Paranoid. Mark says you've been locking doors, freezing accounts, making accusations." "She changed the locks without telling me," Mark interrupted, his voice wounded. "Performative. She's been acting like I'm a stranger in my own home." The uncle nodded slowly. The sister took notes. Evelyn continued. We think you're unwell, Lucy. And for everyone's safety, for your safety, we believe you need professional help. We've arranged for an evaluation at... Stop. My voice cut through the room like glass breaking. Everyone froze. I stood up. Slowly. Reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Before you finish, I said, my voice steady, I'd like you all to hear something. I pressed play. Evelyn's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. If she doesn't obey, we'll get her committed. Easy. Marcus knows people. We stage a breakdown, call 911, she's in for a 72-hour hold before she even knows what happened. Mark's voice. And once she's declared incompetent, everything transfers to us. Clean, legal. Laughter. The room went absolutely silent. I watched Evelyn's face drain of color, watched Mark's jaw clench. That, I said quietly, was recorded 2 weeks ago. In this room. While I was upstairs, supposedly sleeping. The uncle leaned forward. Is this real? Every word. I set my phone down and reached into my bag again, pulled out a folder. Thick, organized. I'd learned a thing or two about presentations in my years building a business. This, I said, handing it to the uncle, is a property transfer agreement. You'll notice it has my signature on page 8. He flipped through. Found it. Except it's not my signature, it's forged. I've had it verified by a forensic document examiner. The report is on page 12. The sister gasped softly. Mark stood up. Lucy, this is insane. You're twisting. Sight down, I said. He did. I pulled out my laptop, opened it, turned it to face the room. These are emails between Mark and Jonathan Berkman, the attorney who drew up that fraudulent contract. They discuss how to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can seize assets I earned, paid for, and legally own. I scrolled slowly. Let them read. The uncle's face hardened with every line. The apartment we're sitting in, I paid the down payment. $60,000. My money. The car Mark drives? Mine. The savings account they tried to transfer? Every cent came from my business. Evelyn tried to speak. This is all. I'm not finished. My voice didn't rise, didn't need to. I pulled up a video file. This is from a hidden camera I installed last week. I apologize for the surveillance, but I needed evidence. I pressed play. The screen showed our kitchen. Clear image. Clear audio. Mark's voice. If my mother moves in, you will smile and serve her, or you'll learn what silence feels like. Then the slap, loud, visceral. My face turning. The split lip. The blood. Someone in the room made a sound. I think it was the sister. I let it play for 10 more seconds. Then I closed the laptop. I refused to let his mother move into my home, I said. My voice breaking slightly now, but not from weakness, from the weight of finally being heard. And he beat me for it. He beat me again when I asked about the forged contract. And he and his mother plotted to have me committed to a psychiatric facility so they could steal everything I'd built. I looked at Evelyn, then at Mark. I refuse to live with your mother, I said, and I refuse to live as your victim. I reached into my bag one last time, pulled out 3 sets of papers. Legal, official, stamped. These are restraining orders, effective immediately. Mark and Evelyn Morrison are barred from this residence, from my place of business, and from contacting me. I handed one set to the uncle. These are eviction notices. They have 72 hours to remove their belongings. Another set to the sister. And these are criminal complaints. Forgery, fraud, domestic battery, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. The final set I placed on the coffee table in front of Mark. His hands were shaking. He wouldn't look at me. Evelyn had gone sheet white. She gripped the armrests of the chair, knuckles bone pale. You can't, she whispered. You can't do this. I already have. The uncle stood, looked at Mark, at Evelyn. His face was stone. I think, he said slowly, this meeting is over. He walked out. The sister followed, shaking her head. The family lawyer gathered his things. I'll be withdrawing as counsel, he said to Mark. Don't contact me. One by one, they left. Until it was just the 3 of us. Mark finally looked at me. Lucy. You have 72 hours, I said. After that, the police will escort you out. I picked up my laptop, my phone, my evidence. And I walked out of that room, my home with my head high and my hands steady. Behind me, I heard it. Evelyn's sob, Mark's curse, the sound of something breaking. But I didn't look back. I was already gone. After the verdict, silence became my favorite sound. It was the sound of justice finally breathing. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Mark was arrested 3 days after the meeting. Domestic battery, attempted fraud, conspiracy. The charges stacked up like dominoes, each one knocking down whatever remained of his reputation. Evelyn was charged separately, forgery. Elder financial exploitation, ironic, considering she was the elder doing the exploiting, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. The bail hearing was brief. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. My lawyer called me afterward. They're both out on bail, but the judge froze all joint assets pending investigation. The apartment on 19th Street is in receivership. Mark's been suspended from his job, pending internal review. And Evelyn? Her country club membership was quietly revoked. Apparently, fraud doesn't play well with the Westchester set. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt quiet. The neighbors were the first to turn. The same ones who'd smiled politely at Evelyn in the lobby, who'd nodded sympathetically when she'd whispered about my episodes. They stopped returning her calls, stopped holding the elevator. One woman, Mrs. Chen from 6C, actually crossed the street when she saw Evelyn coming. I heard about it through the doorman, who'd become surprisingly chatty since the truth came out. Mrs. Morrison, the older one, she tried to have her book club here last week, he told me. Nobody showed up, not one person. I didn't gloat. I just nodded. That's sad, I said. And I meant it, because it was sad. Sad that greed and cruelty could rot a person from the inside out until even their oldest friends couldn't stand to be near them. Mark called me once. From a number I didn't recognize. I answered without thinking. Lucy. His voice was hoarse. Desperate. Please. We need to talk. This is all. It's gotten out of hand. If you'd just drop the charges, we could work this out. I never meant... You meant every bit of it, I said quietly. You just didn't think I'd survive it. Silence on his end. The charges stay, I said. Goodbye, Mark. I blocked the number. 3 weeks later, I heard through Sarah, my lawyer, who heard from her paralegal, who heard from a court clerk that Mark and Evelyn had stopped speaking to each other. They'd started blaming each other in their depositions. Mark claimed Evelyn pressured him. Evelyn claimed Mark was abusive and she was just trying to protect him. Their stories contradicted each other so completely that the prosecutor's case became airtight. They'd turned on each other the moment the walls closed in. They used to whisper that I'd lost my mind, I thought, sitting in my newly reclaimed office, sunlight streaming through the windows. Now they avoid their own reflections. I started seeing a therapist, not because the court required it, they didn't, but because I wanted to. I wanted to understand how I'd let myself become so small, how I'd mistaken silence for peace, endurance for love. You were surviving, Dr. Patel told me during one session. That's not weakness. That's evolution. I should have left sooner. Maybe. Or maybe you left exactly when you were ready. She was right. I'd needed to see it all. The full scope of their betrayal. Otherwise, I might have doubted myself. Might have gone back. Now, I knew. The trial was set for October. I wouldn't have to testify in person. The evidence spoke for itself. Recordings, documents, medical reports, video footage. The prosecutor told me it was one of the most clear-cut cases she'd handled in years. They handed you everything you needed, she said. It's like they wanted to get caught. I thought about that. Maybe they did. Maybe on some level, people who live in lies want the truth to come out, want the weight of their deception to finally break so they can stop carrying it. Or maybe I was giving them too much credit. One afternoon in late September, I drove past the apartment on 19th Street. There was a foreclosure notice on the door. The windows were dark. The building looked abandoned, even though people still lived there. I didn't stop, just drove past, slowly. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just distance. I didn't need to ruin them, I thought. Their lies had already done that. I went home to my apartment, my space, my peace, and I made dinner. Something I actually wanted to eat, not something someone else demanded. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, watched the city lights flicker on as the sun set, and for the first time in 7 years, I felt like myself again. Not the version of me that bent and apologized and shrank, the version that existed before all of that, strong, clear, whole. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't raise my hands. I only raised the truth. And the truth had done what it always does. It set me free. Mark and Evelyn would face their consequences. The courts would decide their fate. Their reputations were already ruined. Their relationship was destroyed. Their greed had eaten them alive from the inside out. I didn't need to do anything more. Some debts don't need to be collected. Life has its own way of balancing the books. And mine? Mine was finally balanced. After the noise fades, what's left isn't victory, it's understanding. I moved out of the apartment 3 months after the trial ended. Not because I had to, the court awarded it to me free and clear, but because I wanted to. Every room held ghosts. Not of violence exactly. Of smallness. Of the woman I'd been when I walked those halls with my shoulders hunched, my voice quiet, my existence apologetic. I found a smaller place in Brooklyn, Prospect Heights, a 1-bedroom with tall windows and good light, no history, no memories, just space. I furnished it slowly. A couch I actually liked, art from a gallery in Fort Greene, books I'd been meaning to read for years, stacked on shelves I built myself one Saturday afternoon. I learned to cook for one. Learned to enjoy the silence. Learned that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. Some nights, I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea and write in my journal. Not about Mark or Evelyn or the trial, about me, who I was becoming, what I was learning. One entry, dated November 14th, reads, "I used to believe love meant giving everything. Now I know love also means knowing when to stop." I read that line over and over, underlined it, because it was true. For years, I'd confused generosity with love, endurance with devotion. I thought if I just gave more, sacrificed more, shrank myself small enough, I'd finally be seen, valued, loved. But love doesn't ask you to disappear. And if it does, it isn't love. The trial ended with plea deals. Mark pled guilty to domestic battery and fraud, 3 years probation, mandatory counseling, a permanent restraining order. Evelyn pled to conspiracy and forgery. 2 years probation, restitution, community service. No jail time for either of them. Part of me, the part that still ached when I looked in the mirror and saw the faint scar on my lip, wanted them to suffer more. But the wiser part, the part that was growing stronger every day, understood something crucial. Justice isn't about watching them fall. It's about standing again without hate. I didn't need them to rot in prison to feel free. I just needed them gone. Out of my life. Out of my head. And they were. The money they'd tried to steal was returned to me, plus damages. I put half in savings, donated a quarter to a domestic violence shelter in Queens, and used the rest to expand my business. Stellar Consulting grew. I hired 3 new employees, took on bigger clients. My name started appearing in trade publications again, not as Mark Morrison's wife, but as Lucy Chen, CEO. The woman I'd always been, before I let someone convince me I was less. One afternoon in December, I ran into Mark's uncle, the retired judge who'd been at that horrible meeting. He was coming out of a coffee shop in Midtown as I was going in. He stopped, looked at me. For a moment, I thought he might just walk past. But he didn't. "Lucy," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." "You don't." "I do." He looked older than I remembered. Tired. "I should have seen it sooner. Should have asked more questions." "I'm sorry." I nodded. "Thank you." "For what it's worth," he said, "you handled it with more grace than most people could." I smiled. Small. Real. I handled it the only way I could. With the truth. He shook my hand and walked away. And I realized I didn't need his apology. But it was nice to hear someone acknowledge what I'd been through. To see me. Finally. As I was. I started therapy twice a week. Dr. Patel helped me unpack years of conditioning, the belief that my worth was tied to how much I could give, how useful I could be, how little space I could take up. "You were taught to earn love," she told me once. "But love isn't something you earn. It's something freely given. Or it isn't love at all." That hit me harder than any slap ever had. Because it was true. Mark never loved me. He loved what I could provide. Evelyn never respected me. She just tolerated me as long as I was useful. And the moment I stopped being useful, they tried to erase me. But here's what they didn't understand. You can't erase someone who knows their own worth. If my story teaches anything, it's this. Kindness without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. And I was done surrendering. One evening in late December, I stood on my balcony, watching the sun set over the city. The sky was streaked with pink and orange, the kind of light that makes everything look softer, kinder. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, the one who woke up every morning dreading the day, who apologized for breathing, who believed she deserved the cruelty because she wasn't good enough, kind enough, quiet enough. And I thought about the woman I was now, standing in her own apartment, in her own life, with her own name and her own future. I wasn't perfect. I still had bad days, still flinched when someone raised their voice, still checked the locks 3 times before bed. But I was healing. And healing, I'd learned, doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering and choosing to move forward anyway. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. Some mistake silence for surrender. But when a woman finally stands up, the whole house of lies collapses. Justice gave me back my name. But peace gave me back myself. And that, more than any verdict, any apology, any revenge that was worth everything. If you've ever lost yourself trying to love someone who only saw your worth in what you could give, I hope my story reminds you, it's never too late to choose yourself. Thank you for keeping these stories alive, stories where justice doesn't shout, it heals. Because in the end, that's all any of us really need. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just the quiet, steady knowledge that we survived. And that we're finally truly free.